Hi community groups, it's good to be with you again. First time in 2019, and we thought it would be a good opportunity, seeing it's our first for the year, to do a reminder of why we actually do community group videos and look at the content of Sunday. I heard that someone had mentioned that doing community group videos was just a rehash of Sunday. But actually that couldn't be further from the truth, because even though we may look at the same content and even some of the same scriptures, our purpose for community group is very different. On Sunday we worship communally together and we receive teaching. But in community group we have the opportunity to ask questions with one another. We have the opportunity to relate the content to our lives, and we also have, very importantly, the opportunity to apply it to our lives. Most Christians attending Lighthouse actually have a vast knowledge of Christian biblical information. And what we actually want to guard against is what I call the Dead Sea syndrome. I don't know if you know that nothing grows in the Dead Sea, hence its name. And the reason for that is water flows into the Dead Sea, but because it's below sea level, that water never gets to drain or flow anywhere. And so while water may evaporate, the nutrients are still left there. And obviously water continues to flow into it, but it doesn't get the opportunity to flow out. That's what creates the Dead Sea. It's not that there are no nutrients, it's that they're too much. And that's what can happen in our lives too, if we only receive the nutrients of God's Word, without an opportunity for application, for God's Word, the content of it, to flow out of us in application and doing it. It can also cause spiritual paralysis and just deadness. And so on Sunday, there is always the opportunity to put in more information. The challenge is often what to leave out, not what to put in. But in community groups, we can let you process that information and that material and apply it to your lives in a way that Pastor Trevor and I could never do effectively from the front of the church on a Sunday. And so we began our series this Sunday looking at the ways of God. That's our focus for these next 6 weeks. And we're looking at lessons that we learn about God's ways through the life of biblical characters. This Sunday we looked at the life of Abraham. And in my message, I said there were 3 things that characterized Abraham's life: a tent, an altar, and a promise. So let's look at the tent first. And a tent is something that says, I haven't arrived yet. And it's a spiritual principle as well. We never arrive, we will never arrive until we see Jesus face to face. And so, what are ways that you are trying to hold on to tent life? What are ways that you could actually make that a principle for your life? To make sure that you realize that you never arrive and get comfortable with it. I'll give you a simple example. I take notes during the service on Sundays, during the message. And I do that obviously because it's a way of retaining the information. But I also do that as an opportunity to remind myself that I haven't arrived. Even though I've been to Bible college, even though I'm a pastor, I know that I still have lots to learn. And so it's a reminder to me that I haven't arrived. So I'd like you to talk about ways that you can instill that value, that principle in your lives? What are ways that you can build tent habits into your life that will help you to understand ways that you can make that real in your life, that you haven't arrived? Maybe you're doing them already. Maybe you can share with the group stuff you're already doing. Or maybe there's stuff that you can brainstorm to think of what you could do. Take some time now. Okay, the second thing we learned from Abraham's life was an altar. And an altar is a place or a monument that reminds us of where we've met with Jesus. And often is characterized by either worship or sacrifice or both. What have become monuments for you that remind you of special times that you spent with God? It might be opportunities that you've journaled. It might be paintings you've painted. But what are ways that you've tried to instill a sense of monument or altar that remind you of times that you've met with God? Another example that I have is this on my this bracelet on my arm. You may remember Open Doors came and shared them with us. And this has 12:26, reminds us of 1 Corinthians 12:26. And for me, this is like a monument. It reminds me to tune my thinking to Christians who are in situations where their lives are in danger because of the gospel. And 1 Corinthians 12:26 says to us that when one part of the body hurts, we all hurt. And it brings me back to pray for those Christians who are under persecution. Altars also speak of sacrifice and worship. So they're monuments, and they also speak of sacrifice and worship. And I made the comment during my message that with altars, we make withdrawals on self so that we make space for God to fill places in our lives. He makes deposits within us. And we've just gone through the 2 weeks of prayer and fasting, and that's exactly what we mean. It's where we deprive ourselves in some way so that we connect with God deeper. And God always shows up when we take those kind of opportunities. It's an altar. And I'd like you to talk about the altar now. Talk about monuments, things like this that you can use to build something of where you've met with God, or that can cause you to want to meet with God. Talk about that, and then also talk about how ways that you have created sacrifice or worship in your life, how it has drawn you closer to God. So even maybe you want to share about the time of prayer and fasting that we've just had. How did that benefit you? What ways did you benefit personally because of taking the time to fast and pray? Okay, I hope that was good. The third thing, tent, altar, and now promise, we learn from Abraham. And God's promise often follows a process of revelation, then reversal, and then restoration. And before we get there, I didn't have an opportunity to put this into the message, but I want to talk about it now. That promise can either be general or it can be specific. Matthew 11:28, for example. Jesus says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Now, all Christians everywhere, in any situation, can claim that promise. It's a general promise. Then you get Genesis chapter 12 and verse 2, where God says to Abraham, I will make you into a great nation. Now you can see, that's very specific. It's for Abraham and his line. We, in a spiritual sense, are part of that line and therefore can borrow from the blessings that are attributed to Israel, but it was given to Abraham. And the Lord will continue to speak special, specific promises to us even today. He'll do that through His Word, He'll do it through prophecy, He'll even do it through dreams and other ways. And I know it can sometimes be quite intimidating to talk about specific promises that maybe God has given you. But if you want to, you can certainly do it now. But what I'd like you to do is talk about general promises that God has given you. What are general promises that God has really laid upon your heart and have really helped you to keep going in your walk with Him? They've kind of inspired you as you've walked. And so take this opportunity now as we break again to talk about specific general promises that God has given you. You can obviously also talk about specific promises if you wish. Alright, in Abraham's life we also see the pattern of God's ways following what I said, reveal, then reverse, and then restoration. And it happens over and over again. What I'd like you to do is answer, what's the dominant phase in your life right now? What are you going through? A time of revelation, that God's revealed something to you? Are you going through a reversal? Or is He restoring something to you? And I think this will be a really profitable time as you connect. Also, why do times of reversal happen? I spoke about that in the message. Why does it happen? And what's God testing? I mentioned there are two things that God's testing. I want you to talk about it, see if you can remember, maybe even share your own information, and your community group leaders obviously are aware of this, so they'll be able to help in the discussion as well. As you look back at God's testing that you've experienced, I'd also like you to answer about how have you benefited through that testing that He's given in your life. There's always a benefit. I'd like you to just chat about that together, because it can be a real benefit just for others to hear of benefits, particularly when they're going through reversals in a particular time in their lives. And obviously, times of reversals can be very difficult. What do you need to remember when you're going through a time of reversal? What's so important for us to remember? Once you've finished that discussion, go into a time of prayer and ministry for one another. Thank God that He's not random, that He actually has a pattern, that He has ways in which He works with us. And it's for us to actually know those ways, whether it's revelation or reversal or restoration. Rejoice with those that are in a time where God's revealed something new to them, or whether He's restoring something to them. Rejoice with them. And then for those who are going through a time of reversal, I want you to pray with those in your group who are going through a really tough time of reversal. Encourage them. Find ways. Ask God to give you a word for them that is going to encourage them. It's so important for us to know that we're supported. Obviously God supports us, but when we have flesh and blood people around us who are supporting us through a time of reversal, It's so important to know we've got their backing. So take some time right now. Go through the questions, do the discussion. Your leaders have the questions, and then if you've forgotten them already, and then minister to one another. I trust you've really enjoyed your community group time that you've been together. I want you to know that I've been praying for you, that God would show up in your group in power, because we're not about ticking boxes. It's not just about showing up to community group. It's an opportunity to really connect in with one another and let God show up among you. That's what I've been praying for. And what's gone on in your community group, whether it's an evening or a morning, whatever time it's been, it could never have happened, what's gone on could never have happened in a morning or evening service. You get that, huh? And so, that's why Sunday services and community groups go together. They're two halves that connect into a whole. I really trust that it's been meaningful for you. God bless. And until next time, goodbye.